viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. We are in Marysville, Pennsylvania with a super special guest, my friends and bonsai master, Suiseki master, and I don't know whatever else, Sean Smith.
Hello.
So we are in your workshop.
Yes.
A very good place. So I would love you to introduce yourself and tell a little bit about your story.
About my story. Okay. First of all, thank you, Mauro. My name is Sean Smith. I live in the little town of Marysville, Pennsylvania, and I've been doing bonsai and Suiseki and some other things for quite a long time. Almost 30 years now. And it was a passion that just came about as a hobby at first. And as everything in life, the more we do it, the more we like it, the better we get at it, and you just progress that way. So back when I was a young 24 years old, I started making little display tables for the bonsai trees, and somebody admired one and said, hey, I could probably sell those for you. And that was in 1994. So the rest is history. So here we are.
Beautiful. So I know Sean for the last probably maybe 8 years.
See?
And we worked together here in his place, and also we was also headlining in some other places in the world, like in China, for example. We had always great time together. So I can say that he is my Suiseki master. I have bonsai is my work and passion, but also my hobby is a little bit Suiseki. So every time I come here, Sean teach me about Daiza work and Suiseki display and all these things. He's very knowledgeable. So we're gonna see through this video some of his beautiful Suiseki.
Okay, so thank you very much. Mauro was mentioning how being a bonsai enthusiast, and he does a little sidetrack with the Suiseki that he enjoys. A lot of people are not really familiar with the art of Suiseki, but bonsai and Suiseki go together completely perfectly. Often in Japan they're used as accents to display a bonsai tree. Sometimes the bonsai tree is actually used as an accent to the Suiseki. So it's very, very important that people realize that Suiseki is in fact a big part of the art of bonsai, but also, more importantly, the art of display, which is everyone's goal when we create our beautiful bonsai. We grow them on, we take care of them, and of course, we water, we fertilize, we prune, wire, unwire, repot, and we put a lot of time and effort into that tree, trying to make it as perfect as can be. But a lot of people have a tendency to forget about the important part of the bonsai, and it's the final result. We all know that bonsai is never finished, so there really isn't a final result, but there's a point in time when the bonsai is where we want it to be. It's clean, it's fresh, it's green, it's brilliant, and it's beautiful. So now is a time where we back off on the care procedures of taking care of the tree, and we enjoy the tree. We bring the tree indoors, as they do in Japan, where a tree is brought in and displayed in a formal tokonoma. For me, this is the epic of bonsai. It's the sitting and relaxing and observing and appreciating all the time and effort you've put into the tree for many, many, many years. And that being said, of course, we do the formal display, very similar to what they do in Japan, where there's generally a bonsai, some type of accent, whether it's a kazimono, or it's a plant, or a piece of art, or Suiseki, and of course the scroll in the background. So it's basically your common 3-point display. This, for me, is the ultimate goal when it comes to bonsai. We love and enjoy working on our trees, pruning and taking care of them and so forth. But the process of when you're almost finished and you can sit back and you take a deep breath and you just admire the tree for its natural beauty. And you have to compliment yourself because it's, as most of you know, it's a long endeavor. It's quite a challenge. But when you get to the result where the tree is where you want it to be, it does something to you in your spiritual sense, in your heart. You know, you feel the passion and the connection between the tree. And when the bonsai is displayed, for me, it's happiness, and it's something I truly love. Most people realize, or perhaps they don't, but the art of suiseki and bonsai, again, being very, very closely related, but in its infancy, there was no bonsai and there was no suiseki. There was something called Bankei, which was basically a tray landscape of some trees, mosses, and a stone. And the Japanese would create basically a landscape. And as every art in the world eventually evolves and it changes, so forth. So basically what happened was that tray landscape was separated. The stone was placed here, the plants were placed here, so now you have bonsai, and now you have what's called today suiseki. So the art of suiseki is basically a hard rock material that basically resembles something miniaturized in nature. And that can be anything from an object, a mountain scene, a single mountain, a waterfall, animals, people, many, many different objects, providing the objects are that of nature. We certainly don't classify a suiseki that looks like a Volkswagen as suiseki. As fun as that may be, but it doesn't really pertain to the actual art of suiseki. So some of these stones we have here, this is a beautiful stone I collected in Puerto Rico some years ago, and it is beautiful black basalt, which is a very desirable material that we use in suiseki. And of course, basalt is widely available in Japan. Of course, you can see the blackness of the stone, which is very, very important. And of course, the wooden base. The wooden base is called the daisa, which is a form-fitting base that the stone is actually sitting inside. It's not sitting on top, it's actually down inside the wood itself. Traditionally in Japan, most of the daisas are made of high-quality rosewood, and this is in fact is rosewood, and it's one of my favorite stones. Here's another stone that we consider as perhaps a mountain stone or a coastal stone, and you can see the stone is very porous. There's lots of nooks and crannies in the stone, and this stone is a good stone for two reasons. One, because of its shape and its color and so forth, but also it can be displayed in what's called a suiban or a doban, which is a metal or ceramic container where it would be placed in the sand, and the sand would be wet, and it would create the image or the feeling of an island perhaps, or a coastline along the ocean. This stone is actually from a local stone from Pennsylvania. Another nice stone I like. We talked about object stones and how stones can actually look like things in nature. Again, a house is not nature, but in fact this is a stone that resembles what we call a hut or a tea house in Japan. So you can see where you have the roof line, you have a bit of the overhang of perhaps the sod roof or whatever the roof was made of. So it creates the image of a house. This particular style of stone, being an object stone, is used quite often in display with bonsai. Has a tendency to help tell a story about the tree, a hut somewhere nestled in the forest with the beautiful bonsai beside it. So object stones are used quite often. People. Sometimes stones resemble what we call people. This is one of my favorite stones purchased in Japan, and for me it gives the image of a woman sitting down on a stool in some type of a long gown, perhaps a kimono, with her head slightly turned to the left. The dies is a little more contemporary. This is something I experimented with, but it's actually cast metal. It was done with aluminum and polished. So, you know, it's kind of interesting. Let's see here. So many stones. This particular stone, a mountain stone, beautiful pinkish red color. Quite often I'm asked, well, does a stone have to be from Japan to be suiseki? Well, in fact, no, it does not. This particular stone is from Mexico, of all places. And I collected this at about 6,000 feet elevation in Puebla, Mexico. So any stone can work for suiseki, providing it falls into the specific guidelines that the Japanese have placed. And stone size, a lot of people say, well, how big does stone have to be? In Japan, they refer to it as a stone should be, for suiseki, should only be the size of one man of normal strength can carry, and no smaller than a jewel or a gem, which would be the palm of your hand. So you can have a very small stone or a very large stone that one person can carry. Anything larger than that, the Japanese would consider a garden stone, where it would be placed out in the Japanese garden somewhere. So quite often I'm asked, how did I get involved in this whole bonsai, suiseki, display hobby, which now has turned into a business for me. Many years ago, I was stationed in Germany, and I had the opportunity to go to Berlin, and this was back during the Cold War, so back in the 80s. And some friends and I got in a car and we drove from East or West Germany to East Germany into Berlin. And walking about the city, I stumbled across a very small local bonsai club that was displaying their trees. And it was the first time I really ever saw a tree besides in a book or a magazine. So it was quite impressive, and I was mesmerized by it, and the hair on the back of my neck actually stood up. Unfortunately, I was, in a foreign country, couldn't speak the language, and so forth. So I basically put that on the back burner, and when I returned to the United States, then I started to pursue bonsai and finding trees and self-educating myself, basically. So in any case, along with doing bonsai that I do and the Suiseki Daiza, I do a number of other things, a lot of woodworking. Basically, most of the things I do are for display. Perhaps that's why earlier I mentioned how much I enjoy, the art of display, where we sit and enjoy our trees. Some of the things that I make, this is what's called a kiribaku. Okay, it is a special wooden box that's designed to preserve the piece of art that's inside the box. And the kiribaku is used quite often throughout Asia, not just Japan, but also Korea, even as far south as the Philippines. But it's a special wood called paulownia, and it has a couple unique properties to it that I've been told from the folks in Japan. But the wood doesn't really burn very well, but it's very buoyant, so it floats. So if your home is in a tsunami, anything inside the box generally is considered safe. The kiribaku is not just for suiseki and so on and so forth, but it's also for wedding kimonos, special pieces of art, anything of any value, musical instruments, samurai swords, and a number of other things. So I started making those as well. I had the opportunity to spend a few days with one of the number one kiribaku makers in Tokyo, and my teacher arranged that for me, where I spent a couple of days there watching the technique and so forth. But generally the boxes are in a tongue and groove where the door slides up and down. And of course inside is where the item is placed. Now, the artwork itself is the box itself is only a storage box. It's not to be used as shipping or anything like that. It's just a place to keep it safe and secure. So this, as a lot of you bonsai enthusiasts will know, this is called a root stand. This is a stand that's used primarily for a cascading bonsai, which would hang below the pot itself. And the Japanese use these quite often in display. So I took it upon myself to learn how to do this by myself and started carving them. And I've carved quite a few of them, different sizes and different types of wood. This particular piece of wood is actually yew, and it's a very hard, dense wood, as we know, and is quite difficult to carve, but the results are pretty amazing. And I enjoy this. It's something that relaxes me and gives me nice satisfaction when I'm finished. Okay, so when Mauro was walking in, I was working on a Daiza for this beautiful stone. This is Seijigawa from Japan, a beautiful old suiseki, probably close to 60, 70 years old. So when we say old, yeah, it's a stone that's probably millions of years old, but it was taken from the river probably 50, 60 years ago as suiseki, so it has a beautiful patina on it. Of course, the Daiza is actually made of Pennsylvania walnut. You can see underneath the placement of the feet, and of course my seal or my chop here tells who made the Daiza. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, they sit actually inside the wood, not on top of the wood. And this is a great stone. It's nice movement, and it's a beautiful stone. As I was talking earlier about the Kiribaku and explaining it, here you can see this box is actually for this suiseki, and here on the front I put a description, which is basically Black Mountain, which obviously this is black and it looks like a mountain, so it works pretty well. Here is my name in Japanese, my stamps here that depict that, you know, it's my stone. I made the box and the Daiza for it. And this is a very important part of the art of suiseki, is to keep the item with the box. If this box was destroyed or misplaced, or the stone was taken or misplaced, nobody would know the story. So generally in Japan, on the back lid of the box, there'll be a written story about the stone and previous owners of the stone. And this is how the history for stones in Japan is kept, and how the provenance of the stone is recorded. So when you see a stone in Japan, if you get there and you see a price that's extremely expensive, 9 chances out of 10 it has a long history, many different owners and so on and so forth. So the Kiribaku and the suiseki together are very, very important.
So thank you so much, Sean. It's been a great learning experience. It's always great to hear your explanation and your passion of explaining this beautiful art. And thank you so much, everyone, to follow my channel, and see you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Bonsai Dream.
Right. No pain.
Easy.
Yeah.
Dream. Bonsai Dream.